This is Six Tackles with Gus, with Matthew Thompson and Gus Gould.
We are back. How good is it to be into the footy for 2023? Six Tackles with Gus, episode 1, the pre-season challenge. Manly won it. I'll get Gus's thoughts on that. What's doing at the Dragons? Is Benji bringing the magic back to the Tigers? The Bulldogs had their season launch last night, and we'll get some predictions from Gus for season 2023. Look, I've been a bit melancholy over the summer, and I've been wondering what's wrong, and I've worked it out. I didn't get my weekly dose of Phil Gould. Welcome back.
Matty Thompson, how you doing?
What'd you do with Gus? What have you done? Are you making a comeback?
I think you're playing again, yeah. maybe marbles.
How good are you looking? What have you been doing?
A little bit of training.
Oh, very good. Feel good?
Yeah, I do.
Great.
Good.
I'm pumped for this year. And I'll get some predictions from you later in the episode. Bearing in mind, too, that you did tip the Premiers in the grand final last year, so we'll see if you can make it 2 from 2. Pre-season challenge, of course, generates a lot of interest, and I actually think it's generated some good momentum heading into the season. But Manly, who everyone said was a basket case at the end of last year, have come out on top of the pre-season challenge, and they did it without Turbo, and they did it without DCE, and they beat the Roosters comfortably last week. So it's all pre-season stuff, but gee, a couple of months is a lifetime in rugby league.
It is. You know, the trials are always an interesting time at this time of year. You know, it's they're a necessary evil. You need to play them, although you do risk injury to your major players. And a few teams opted not to play some of their superstars throughout the trials, which I can understand, particularly on the back of a World Cup last year. So, but you know, I think every team trialled, went through the trial process with really good intention and got a lot out of it. There were some teams that probably didn't perform as well as they would have liked, and a lot of potential seen in some of the others, particularly Manly, as I say, who ended up winning the little challenge prize they put on for the trials just to keep some interest with the fans and the broadcasters. But it's they did really well, Manly. It was an anomaly last season how their season ended for them. They were actually going pretty well up until a point in the season there where they had some internal issues they had to sort out. New coach, new attitude, and they've certainly started this year very, very brightly. So all goes well for a good season with them.
Yes, well, it's an important early win too for Anthony Seibold, who brought a lot of baggage, of course, into this role with Manly as their new head coach. And Danny Weidler from 9 News had a one-on-one with Anthony Seibold last night, and he spoke about a number of things, including how Gus had a word with him prior to taking over the job at Manly.
Phil was really generous with his time. When I was coaching the Broncos, there was one time there I spent a full day at Phil's house.
What was that like?
It was unreal. Look, talking with one of the best minds in the game for the best part of 6 or 7 hours. In the end, I had to go because I had to pick the kids up from school. I would have stayed there for another few hours.
And it was some Gould wisdom that inspired him to face the world again.
There was a message that he sort of said to me after I finished up with the Broncos, and it was around don't hide behind the curtains, you know. And the message I took from that was, although this has been a really challenging time, and get back out there and hold your head high.
Well, that's good of you to have a word of encouragement to Anthony Seibold. Did you go in the cinema room? Did you show him a movie or something?
We did, actually. We went in there and watched a little bit of football at one stage of the day. He was over at my place for a few hours. That was back actually at the back end of his coaching tenure with the Broncos. Paul White, who was the CEO of the Broncos at that time, just reached out. They were doing as much as they could to support Anthony, and you got to understand, like, the Broncos is obviously a very high-profile position, and things weren't going too well for them up there at the time. And there's a lot of pressure involved with NRL coaching at the best of times, let alone when you're in such a high-profile position as that. And Paul White just reached out to see if I would have a talk to him for a little bit of support, which was obviously I would. And I'd sort of had a few phone calls with him, and then we took the opportunity when he was down in Sydney for him to come and spend a day at my place, and we just talked football and coaching and virtually life. And I find it, and even aside from Anthony, that this is not the only time this has ever happened. I mean, it happens quite regularly, to be honest. And normally it's with coaches that have got to the back end of their time and you can see the end coming, and they're kind of searching for answers as to what's gone wrong. And What I find with all of them, that it's not the coaching and it's not the knowledge of football that beats them. It's everything that goes around it. It's all the other things that the head coach now has to contend with these days. And in fact, anyone in rugby league. And the most vicious of that can obviously be media and social media and the way they're treated in those areas. And it can be very, very taxing on them. It's a difficult enough job at the best of times, other than having to put up with some of the stuff they have to put up with. And I think Anthony, if he had his time over again, would probably do things differently. The one thing I wanted to stress to him was that it wasn't the end for him. Failure is a part of your journey. Failure is a part of your future success. And I said, that little thing I said to him, don't hide behind the curtains. I said, walk around with your head up, mate, and you'll rise again, go and do some assistant jobs. But the day will come where you'll be a head coach again. I'm 100% certain of that. And I'm thankful that that's happened for him. He's now got the Manly job. They've started the season off very well. He's a very knowledgeable man on the game of rugby league. There's no risk in the world. It's not about the coaching and it's not about the knowledge of the game that I think sometimes gets these rookie coaches into trouble. It's more dealing with the rough and tumble of life in the NRL and exposure to media the way it is today, and particularly social media and the way, and even young players of today are very judgmental of coaches, and it's not an easy environment whatsoever. But
what does that mean? What do you mean the young players are judgmental?
It's different. It's very, very different. I was even talking to Eddie Jones the other day. We interviewed him for Stan, and we were talking about the players today compared to, say, 20, 30 years ago. And it is different. Young players today are very demanding, and they're very judgmental, and it's very much an individual thing. And it can be quite taxing on coaches. I don't know that I'd like to coach in today's world.
Yeah, you mentioned his knowledge of the game. I suppose the evolution of sporting coaches in all codes is an interesting element of this. And during that story last night Danny Weidler had on the news, Anthony Seibold highlighted how he'd sat down with the whole playing group there at Manly, and it was a bit of an honesty session, but he said he was open and said, I didn't know whether I had the wherewithal to take on a head coaching job here again, but I'm here and I'm going to do it. And he said, I suppose that is that indication of a bit of maturity? That's something, putting your ego aside and showing your vulnerable side, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a part, I guess, what every club has gone through the off-season. That's about connectivity and building relationships and building trust and getting to know the face behind the face rather than just the footballer. You're getting to know the person as well. And if you have that affinity with them, if you have that relationship with them, it helps in your communication. That will help in your building of your relationship with someone that you're going to be spending a lot of time with over the next 12 months and maybe for years. So for him to be a part of that process and expose himself like that, and I've sat through, what's happened at the Bulldogs, and I've certainly been a part of it with other clubs, and it can be quite a revealing process for the individuals when they tell their life stories and where they'd come from and how they feel mentally. And we're only talking about, we talk a lot about mental health these days, and I don't guess it shocks anyone that we have young players under a lot of pressure and different things happen in their lives, and some of them come from very difficult backgrounds, and we'd have anything up to a dozen players a year probably in private counselling and all that sort of thing. But we need to support more our staff and our coaches as well, because they are really in a high pressure situation. It's a difficult job. It's highly scrutinised. Back when I coached years ago, we didn't have all the commentary, and we didn't have all the magazine shows, and we didn't have all the so-called experts in the media that we have today. We didn't have so many ex-players and ex-coaches commenting in the media and critiquing everything that happened and giving their advice and, pulling fans this way and that way, depending on how they learn. That just wasn't there. It was, people may have well been saying it, but they're saying it at the pub or at home, and they're not saying it on social media, and they're certainly not getting quoted in the media about it and placing more pressure on individuals. And we do know that the media will target individuals because they have their own agendas and they have their own favourites, and that's an unfortunate part of our game, an unfortunate part of our media, but you can't control it, so you just have to deal with it.
All right. So from what you're seeing, you put Turbo, who's going to be fit for round one, back in there in DCE, and they've got a proper football team.
Oh, they have. Well, they had a proper football team last year.
Yeah.
They self-destructed last year, and I'm still not up with exactly what happened at that time, but something obviously happened because they went from being a serious finals contender to sort of dropping out of the race. So, provided that, and that would have been a part of the whole connectivity and relationship building over the off season to understand where everyone comes from and be very supportive with each other. And if they can get that part of it right, the football's never been a problem to Manly. Manly never had problems with football. They're a great football club and a tough football club, and they play with great skill and flair. And as I say, like they've performed extremely well in the trials and without their two main playmakers. So when they come back into the side, they're going to be very hard to beat.
Yeah. Bad news though, Josh Schuster's going to miss round 1 with a calf. A few of them had ice packs actually after that win over the Roosters on the weekend, but he'll miss round 1. They've got to bye round 2, so he'll be back fit and firing for week 3. You mentioned Eddie Jones and Anthony Seibold, of course. His journey back to being a head coach, he went and spent time under Eddie in rugby union. One of the master coaches, and 2 master coaches sat down and had a chat, as Gus has already pointed to. Gus with Eddie Jones. Here's a little snippet.
And the rugby league players that you've admired over the years that didn't play rugby, who would you have liked to have seen play rugby?
Oh, we had Andrew Johns done, mate.
Really?
In 2005, yeah. We had him done. He was going to come.
In 2005?
Yeah. I think he was still around.
Was I?
And he would have made a hell of a difference.
No, wow. Slater?
Slater would have been handy. That Cameron Murray would be pretty handy at 12.
He's
There's
still
a few
playing.
of them at the moment.
You can't mention that. They'll say you're going to try and pinch you.
Yeah, married to the Wallabies, eh?
Yeah,
He showed his cards there.
That sounded a bit ominous. We're talking Andrew Johns, Billy Slater,
And
Cameron Murray. Where did that come from?
Oh, he's off.
Andrew Johns, Billy Slater, Cameron Murray.
Whoa.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, Russell Crowe just fell out of the chair.
That just didn't fit.
You've got a scoop and you weren't even trying.
Andrew Johns, Billy Slater, Cameron Murray.
Whoa. Yeah.
Well, I've got no doubt he's a target
Oh.
after listening to that.
Who do you reckon would have been great rugby players? I mean, Andrew Walker, he's your favourite, but he played for the Wallabies, of course, and Matt Rogers was great, and Lottie and Wendell went over there. I mean, Joey would have.
Well, that was one of the points I made in the interview. Back when he was coaching the Brumbies, when I retired from coaching, Andrew Walker was playing for us at the Roosters, and I advised Andrew that he should go to rugby, that I was retiring and I kind of wouldn't be around to look after him. And I'd spoken to Eddie Jones about him, and the Brumbies took Andrew Walker on, and Eddie invited me down that off-season to speak with the Brumbies as a group. They were one of the top Super 12 teams at the time. I think it was Super 12 back then. And I talked a lot with Eddie about footy. He loves rugby league. He played rugby league as a kid, and he's a rugby league fan, South Sydney fan.
Well, he can't poach Cameron Murray then if he's a South fan.
Oh,
Go and get some of the Roosters.
Well, he said it. Andrew Johns, Billy Slater, Cameron Murray. He couldn't get it out quick enough. But he said to me at the time, and he was very worried about it, and it was part of the big interview we did with Stan that I found most fascinating, because development of future players is my pet thing. I love that part of the game. And he said to me back then, he said, if a Super 12 rugby team, to compete with the South African teams and the New Zealand teams that were in the competition, Super 12 rugby team needed someone to come and play in the back line now, straight away, be it the Wallabies or his Brumbies. He said, I'd have to go and get a rugby league player.
Oh.
He said there was no development pathway system, and the school system had sort of let them down on preparing people for that level of football. Right, the school system was all right, and the top level was all right, but there was nothing in between. And at that time, and he was very worried about it. And so Wendell Saylor, Lottie Takiri, Matt Rogers, Andrew Walker, all found their way from rugby league over to there. And I can remember too, around that time we recruited a young bloke called Ryan Cross. Now, Ryan Cross was a champion schoolboy rugby player. His father had played rugby league for the Roosters, and we spoke to him, and his aim was to be a Wallaby. He wanted to go and be a Wallaby. And I remember saying to him as a teenager, if you want to be a Wallaby, come to rugby league for 6 or 8 years first, and that will get you ready to be a top-class rugby player. That's how we viewed it at the time, and that's what he did. He went and played for the Wallabies and as well, and he was a very good rugby league player. But and Eddie Jones admitted that that's where rugby league gets it right. Rugby league gets the pathways much better than rugby union at the moment.
I'm not sure much has changed there either. I'm quite good mates with Brett Papworth, former Wallaby, and he's lamenting the reduction. And I suppose all sports are grappling with this, but like a drop off in participation at junior level. A lot of the clubs in rugby are folding, etc., and it's all basically developed out of the private school system.
Yeah, it is. It is. And rugby league would love a presence in those school environments as well. The rugby league presence in schools has, I think, diminished significantly as well. What we've been able to do is make sure that the NRL clubs keep up their own pathways programs in junior rep football, and it's adequate at the moment. It's nowhere near as much as what you're going down a rabbit hole here, Matt.
Oh, look, we don't want to go down rabbit holes in the first episode.
I'll talk for hours on this stuff. But I said to Eddie, has it improved since we spoke, those many years ago? He said, no. I said, who's responsible for it? He said, well, that's the $64 question. He said, no one's really addressed it. He said that it's going to need a Packer-style revolution to take over the game to get that. And I didn't really understand how he thought that would happen, but if you look at rugby, world rugby, the money is made for world rugby by the international game. The international game makes the money, and then I suppose it's filtered down to different levels.
Right.
Obviously, he doesn't think significantly enough. In rugby league, the money is made by the NRL competition. Right? The NRL competition provides the international competition, and the NRL competition has got to provide money for pathways and development, which I've been very big on with the Commission over the last 3 or 4 years in trying to, and obviously COVID stepped in and stopped a lot of the plans that they had at that time. So we need to get back to that, and part of the whole CBA thing and the whole money thing and broadcasting rights at the moment is the NRL needs money to do different things.
I'll fill in your rabbit hole. Neither of us, well, you're probably a bigger expert on rugby than me, but geez, I reckon that's an inspired decision to get him back. He's a winner, Eddie Jones, isn't he?
Oh, he could coach rugby league. Easily. He can coach any sport. He is a high quality, best practice coach, and he's the biggest and best thing about him is he's an excellent recruiter of coaching talent. He's got no fear about who he brings into the system, with expertise in all parts of it. And really, this goes back to the American NFL model and NBL models across there that we've gone across and studied for years and years. The head coach in those areas is more a manager. You go to the great Alex Ferguson and Manchester United. They're more managers than they are actual coaching. The hands-on coaching is done by other people. They'll have their philosophy for the way the program runs. They'll have their philosophy on recruitment and all that. But these are things you've got to delegate and specialise and give to the people that. And Eddie has always recruited smart people to come and coach for him and help him out. He could coach rugby league easily. And he's a very, very experienced management man. He's a very personable fellow. He's, obviously he's gone through the twos and fro's of pressure and failure and success and understands that that's part of the process. And
World Cup this year.
I think he'd be an asset to any club.
I reckon the Wallabies can win that. Bearing in mind too, everyone trashes Eddie Jones, and this isn't a rugby podcast, but it was a Johnny Wilkinson right foot field goal that stopped the Wallabies from winning the World Cup under him back in 2003.
Yeah,
so the bloke's got a bit going for him.
Yeah,
and you'll see the World Cup here on Nine's Wide World of Sports too, on Stan Sport.
He was with South Africa, he was with England. I mean, he's got a whole resume of success, but that, don't start me on media. You're a media.
Well, so are you.
No, I'm not.
You're not?
I just work with this. I tolerate this.
Reinventing the wheel. All right. We've been all upbeat and positive. Gee, what's doing it? The Dragons. Michaeli Ravalawa and Zane Musgrove had a blue at 6 a.m. after they were on the drink all night, after they got flogged in the Charity Shield. That's one issue. Is it wise to be having all-night sessions less than 2 weeks out from the start of the season? I don't know. But to an issue I'm sure you're more comfortable discussing, they've been dreadful in the first 2 weeks. But the fans already want the coach sacked before the season starts. Now, that may be premature, but there's got to be some alarming signs about their football in the trials.
Yeah, look, trials are trials. and it's never as good as people say, and it's never as bad as people say.
Mm.
And trials are trials, and some players handle it better than others, and some clubs handle it better than others. And in 2 weeks' time, those trials aren't going to mean a thing, not for anyone. I think the Dragons have got a pretty handy roster. I was a little surprised where they finished last year. And obviously things haven't started off well from what the exposed form that we've seen. From what I understand, they're training okay, and and they've had some unfortunate headlines in the last week or so. But they obviously need to hit the ground running from round one. They've got the ability to do that, but gee whiz, it's sort of been underperforming for a couple of years now. So they need to get their act together.
Well, they'll win week one.
You got to buy.
Got the buy.
Yeah, and that's that might be another thing too. They had more than 2 weeks to get ready for their first game. The incident between the two players. I mean, they wouldn't be the first two players in history to pull themselves on after a few beers. But whether or not that was a sensible thing to be doing after the way they trialled and what was coming up. But they have 3 weeks to get ready. Does that satisfy you a little bit better?
Very good. What about the Tigers?
Good.
You like the Tigers?
Yeah, good.
You reckon Benji's sprinkled a bit of the Ronnie Palmer magic dust over them?
Well, I've got no doubt about it. No doubt. I think the old bloke, Tim Sheens, too. Tim Sheens, through his whole coaching career, has been one for playing bright, attacking football, and he coaches a lot of the basics, but he coaches a lot of ball movement. He coaches a lot of plays. It's a little less structured than some teams, but he certainly goes with the flair of the players, and there's no doubt that he's had that influence there. And he coached both, Robbie and Benji, and I'd imagine they'll feel the same about it. But it was a good one for them on the weekend. Watching the first 20 minutes of that trial was one of the worst trials I'd ever seen. It was extremely hot, and there was a lot of mistakes.
It was hot.
And then I think Canberra scored the first try. It was a great try down the right-hand side. And then Tigers got a run of possession and started to run in some points, and they really kicked up, gave them a lot of confidence, and they sort of went on with it. I'm not reading too much of that into the Canberra performance, but it's certainly heartening for the Tigers fans to see a lot of those young players and playing with a smile on their face, which is good.
Yeah, they look a happy unit. I'll tell you who's caught my eye, and he did in the All-Stars game, Brent Naden. He looks super fit and slick.
He's always been a great athlete.
Yeah.
Always been a great athlete and always been a good player. He gets in his own way a little bit. And it's when things are going good, they're going good. He's got to learn to handle it when things get a little bit difficult.
Yeah. Appy's captain of the West Tigers this year, which that is an outstanding recruit. A twofold question this. Clearly he's going to be critical to whatever the Tigers do this year, but do you think the Panthers have budgeted for just how big a hole he's going to leave in that team?
Well, firstly, he's a great get for the Tigers. He hasn't played in the trials yet, obviously, and for them to perform the way they did the other day without him is even more meritorious to the performance. Appy brings leadership to a team, and he brings creativity, he brings calmness, he brings confidence. He's one of those players that just doesn't get rattled. Whatever you throw at him, he's got an answer for. So. And no surprise that he's been given the captaincy there. He's played a very significant part in the leadership of that great Panthers team for the last 3 seasons while he's been there as well. So on the other side of your question, will he be missed? Of course he'll be missed. He'll be missed by the Panthers.
Do you think they realise how much he'll be missed? Did they get a reality check the other day?
I think, well, the World Cup Challenge is a different story, but I think, I think the Panthers recognise that that's going to be a challenge for them. Nick Kenny's Nick Kenny they've used as a front rower and a lock forward at various times because his high work rate and his energy and his defence and all of that. He doesn't have the finesse of Appy at a dummy half. Sonny Luke is another player who's up there who is very much like Appy, very creative. Now Sonny was a terrific junior player up there. He played with Nathan Cleary and Jerome and all those fellas in the under-20s back years ago when they won a premiership. And then he had sort of shoulder problems, and he wasn't a big boy, Sonny, and he's just taken a little bit more time physically to sort of come to the, the physicality of the game, and it was interesting the Panthers got him back last year, and he showed some really nice touches last year, and I think he's the one that's probably going to create or replace that Appy role. and Nick will provide the defence in the middle. So I can see a tandem sort of role played there by those two. And
yeah, well, Mitch Kenny started actually at the end of last year, and then Coruscant came on. So that was the format they changed.
Yeah, and Nick Kenny would come on in the front row. He'd come on at lock foot. Mitch Kenny would come on in the front row, and because of his work rate and all of that, and the mobility of front rowers these days. You look at that boy up at the Cowboys who's now playing Orange in football, Ruben Cotter. It's changed the way people think about front row forwards and size and mobility, and even a fellow like Moses Leota at Penrith. He's not a big man, but extremely agile and fast feet and across the ground, and they're the sort of front rowers with the 6 again rule and the way the game's played these days. You need that real mobility in the forwards, and that's why a fellow like Mitch Kenny can get in there and do that. And Sonny Luke's a very talented young player. They'll work it out, the Panthers. They've got too many good players there not to work it out. But
he's
a loss.
Their passing was terrible the other day. Well, I know it's their first hit out.
The World Club Challenge?
Yeah. You know whose fault that was?
Well,
you.
Why is that?
Because all the St Helens, they're India after that. They had a life-size blow-up doll of you in the change room, and they were giving an uppercut as they ran out to play. It's your fault. Yeah. You're the reason they won.
I was the motivation.
Yeah, you bagged them. What'd you say? They declare it half time.
Oh, where do I send my invoice?
They had a blow-up Gus doll, and they were all punching it as they ran out.
What was the coach doing if I had to motivate him?
You did the job for him. That's right. That's right. I'm not. By the way, Taylor May gone for the season. That's something the Panthers haven't contended with a lot over the last few years. And a season-ending injury.
That's another loss. And Viliami Kikau, obviously, who's Viliami's an influencer. He's an influencer on the scoreboard. And it's going to take a time. And the World Club Challenge, I think, was a wonderful opportunity for the Panthers that they missed. And I think if they had their time over again, they might have approached it a little bit differently. To have a World Cup final played at home, on your home ground, against a great club like St Helens, I was expecting a lot more. Now, granted, they had players missing. I didn't know Liam Martin wasn't going to play. I didn't know that Dylan Edwards wasn't going to play. I didn't know that it was going to storm, for 75 or 80 minutes of the game. Those sort of factors really took away from what Panthers were capable of doing. No excuse. Both teams had to play in it. St Helens played to the conditions much better and performed brilliantly. But I thought the Panthers missed a real opportunity there. And also, they had some players in that side that didn't win the Premiership, but were there to defend it. And that can be difficult at times too. They had a couple of new back row and, fellas that were new to the club, and they chose to go with...
Sorensen didn't play either, did he?
Sorensen didn't play, and they lost Taylor May early. No excuses, though. I don't want to take anything away from the great win by St Helens, but I think Panthers missed a real opportunity there. And I think if they had their time over, they might have approached it differently. It looked like St Helens came out into camp for 3 weeks. They really made a big deal out of this. They got themselves ready. We actually had dinner with Mike Rush and Paul Wellens, the CEO and the coach, the night before at Canterbury. We invited them over to Canterbury, and they looked after our people during the World Cup over there. And I've known Mike.
It was a setup.
I've known Mike for years because St Helens used to bring development players out to play against the Panthers every couple of years out there. We had an arrangement with them, and I've known Mike and even very, very well over there in St Helens. I've sent them some players over the years. I've sent them Luke Walsh and Mozzie Masoi and Lachlan Coote and fellas like that have gone across and done really well for St Helens. So we had dinner with them the night before, and Mike Rush said, we'll be hard to beat. And Paul Wellens said, no, we're really ready. We've gone about it right. We've come over here. We've planned for 3 weeks. We've had a trial game. They're going to know they're in a game. I guess most people were thinking in the heat and being out of Penrith, it'll be very difficult for them. But the weather changed and the conditions changed, and Panthers weren't ready for it. Putting it bluntly, they didn't put their best foot forward at all, and St Helens did. But that's what you have to do in the big games, and they deserve the trophy. They've got it on the plane going home, and they can stick it to me all they like.
Yep.
Good luck to them.
Taking your life-size blow-up doll back with them too.
Do I send an invoice or not?
Punches with holes in it.
Do I send an invoice or not?
You send an invoice to everyone, so you may as well send an invoice to them as well. I'll ask Gus about the Bulldogs in a minute. See, this is a tactic to keep you listening. 6 tackle trivia. We're going to bring it back this year. I've been thinking about it. I think we'll do a different club each week. So all the clubs get a trivia question. Well, that'd be hard with the Dolphins, wouldn't it?
No.
We'll come up with something. But this one's a World Club Challenge question. Who is the only other English Super League team to win the World Club Challenge in Australia? Now, there's some sub-questions here. I don't know who they think you are, the Oracle. What year was it? Who was the opposition? And a bonus point if you can guess the correct score. A little bit of thinking music for you.
Yeah.
Who was the only other English Super League team to win the World Club Challenge in Australia? Back with more Six Tackles after this. You got it?
Ask the question again.
Who is the only other English Super League team to win the World Club Challenge in Australia? That's the first one. That's the main question.
Wigan.
Correct. What year was it?
What year was it?
Actually, scrap that. Who was the opposition?
I think the opposition were the Broncos.
It was the Broncos, Gus. Well done. You don't know the score.
Well, I can imagine must have been around 93 or 94.
It was 94.
Because they won in 92, 93. And I don't even think it was that close. I think it was 20 odd to a dozen or something like that.
You're too good. It was 20 to 14.
Yeah.
And it was at the QE2 Stadium in Brisbane.
Yeah.
Well done.
They were good. They were a great club, Wigan.
Oh, they were, yeah.
Yeah, they had. They were a good club. So were the Broncos, obviously, but yeah, they came out to Australia and did the deed there.
What's it like in Wigan? Are they like soul of the earth, rough and tumble mob?
Oh yeah.
Well, they put one on your chin after a few skewies? Or?
They drown the soft ones at birth, mate.
So that's proper working class territory.
She's a tough town.
Yeah. You been there much?
We actually went there in 1991. Panthers won the comp.
Yeah.
And we're in the dressing room after the game. We're on about our fourth beer. And John Quayle and Morris Lindsay, the great Morris Lindsay, passed away some years ago, Morris. And so they walked in, and Morris was the CEO of the great Wigan club. And I didn't even know who'd won the English Premiership that year. Wigan had won it because the competitions in those days used to be run at the same time. They played in. And so he comes in after the game, and little Morris is standing there, and they've said, we look forward to welcome you in Wigan next week. I said, what are you talking about? They said, well, you've got to come over for the World Club Challenge. I said, when? He said, we're playing next weekend. We said, no. I said, no. I said, we're not going to Wigan. And he said, yeah, no, you've got to come over. It's all arranged. John Quayle said, no, you've got to go. It's all compulsory. Oh. I had no idea that's what we had to do. And I looked around at my group and I thought, well, I wonder who's going to get on a plane to go to Wigan. Like, no one's going to get on the plane. I think we corralled half of them to go across.
That's why the World Club Challenge has been unfair.
It was Penrith's first ever premiership.
Yeah.
And our boys were on the drink for a week. And they were all coming out with excuses not to go. And I remember Mark Guy rang and said, I've lost my passport. And then 2 minutes later, Greg Alexander rang and said, I've lost my passport. I said, no, MG's used that excuse. You can't use that excuse.
Did Brandy go?
I think Brandy went, but he was injured. Brad Fittler and a couple of them went on the tour to PNG. So they went and played international football.
Oh.
A few of the others didn't go. Mark Guy refused to go.
I'm not going.
And which was fine because we gave a run to all the other boys in the squad that had sort of been around. You know, you win with more than just 13 players in a premiership. And we finally got enough on the plane to go across there, and they stuck us at Liverpool, which was good because we went to the cavern where the Beatles went, and and Liverpool's a soccer town. They don't even know what rugby league is, and we played at Anfield, which is a soccer ground, beautiful historic ground, but the in-goals were like 3 metres, and then it fell off into a cliff.
Then we hit the fence.
Yeah, and we had nowhere to train, and the boys were on the drink the whole. And we didn't want to go. We just didn't want to go. Simple as that. You know, it was Royce Simmons' last game, the grand final the week before. Now we want him to play again the following week.
Did Royce play?
Royce played. He went. Yeah, he couldn't wait.
I remember getting up as a very young man and watching that game. Early hours of the morning.
Yeah.
Graham Bradley played. I still remember.
Yeah, Graham Bradley played, and I remember we went to a press conference the day before, and our chairman Wigan gave. You know, they swapped gifts, for the media and that sort of thing. Wigan gave us a nice gift, and our gift to them was a picture of the Panthers, the premiership winning team. He said, and our chairman said, we'd like to present you a photo of the World Club champions for 1991. And Morris Lindsay looked at me and said, we can have a wager if you like. I said, we're in trouble here. We're in big trouble.
Yeah, very
I think we were down I think we were down 8-0 after 15 minutes, 4 penalty goals in front of the post. So that was.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we got the fair go over
Did
there.
you have a training run, or you couldn't corral them?
Well, we finally got out one day. It was blisteringly cold and wet. And
That'd be the worst.
They trained us on some park ground in the middle of no, we didn't have a training, so we had to loosen up and then. No, but the boys tried hard, and Wigan were. No, don't get me wrong. Wigan were a really good side. They might have beaten us anyway, but that was no chance. And I said that's ridiculous going over 7 days after a grand final. Particularly, Penrith had just won their first comp, so yeah, we didn't take it very, very seriously at all. Again, taking nothing away from Wigan, they were a great side.
We might have found the solution to all of this.
But some years later, Wigan came out. 3 years later, Wigan came out and beat the Broncos out here. So. They were a very, very strong club.
But to have the English team come out here as part of this pre-season challenge, I think seems to work nicely.
Yeah, it did, and they've got to go back and play in their club competition this weekend. But it was a big thing for them. They took 3 weeks to come out here. They stayed. They trained. They got acclimatised. They had a trial game against the Dragons, and which they won. And they were just too good for the Panthers. They really gritted it out. The good thing about it was that. Penrith usually blow sides away early. Penrith start very fast. You just can't go with them, and then they accumulate the points later. They got into Penrith early, jumped to the lead, and protected the lead with pride, and got the job done. And Penrith probably scored a lucky try in the last minute there to get it to golden point. But St Helens, when they got their chance, they kicked their field goal and did it very, very professionally. So they're obviously a very good side.
All right, let's sort of turn to prediction time. Now, a reminder: Ask Gus every week. We're going to post it up on our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you can send through a question for Gus every week. The first question is from Bulldogs fan 434. Who do you think will be the biggest improvers for the 2023 season, and why will Canterbury?
Yeah, that would be nice if we were. Look, I think there'll be a lot of teams improve, and the gap last year between the top 8 and the bottom 8 was quite significant. And so the bottom 8 teams have got a lot of ground to make up if they hope to play finals football this year. A lot of ground just to get back on level terms. And I think there's a lot of clubs that have recruited well and they've obviously trained well. The off-season's been hindered a little bit by the World Club Challenge and key players returning back late and probably not having a great preparation. They probably haven't played enough or trained enough leading into the start of this competition. It's why some clubs chose to rest them through the trials. And that's an issue that the game needs to address with the RLPA about the amount of time they have off these players at the end of one season to another and different things, but that's for another day. So there's a lot of ground for a lot of clubs to make up. And, of course, we've got a 17th team this year, which has diluted the talent pool just a little bit again, and they'll be looking to make a splash in their first season as well.
But, Gus, he's got it. But, man, our man here who sent in the message, or person, Bulldogs fan 434, he has to be, or she has to be, very optimistic about what the Bulldogs can achieve this year. Not just the signings, but the way you've gone about your business probably in the first couple of weeks. And the good news story of the summer, I reckon, has been Josh Reynolds coming back to the club.
Yeah, I actually told that story at the season launch last night. I got a text message from Josh mid last year just to say that he told his club that he was finished playing, his playing days were over, and that he was coming back to Sydney, and that he'd missed being at the Bulldogs, and probably he shouldn't have left when he did at the time that he did. And it wasn't about money or anything. He just wanted to come back and help at the club. He was prepared to work in the community section. He was prepared to work in sponsorship. He was prepared to work in marketing. He was prepared to work in junior pathways. Whatever we could do for him, do you think there might be an opportunity to come and have a talk about returning to the Bulldogs? To which I said, yeah, of course, mate. As soon as you get back to Australia, let me know. And he sent me a couple of texts. He said, is it all right to come and see? I said, yeah. There was never any talk about him playing at that time. None. None. And I was actually even approached by people in the media saying, oh, there's a rumour he's coming back to play. I said, no, he's not. That's not what he said to me. I said, he's coming back to do this. Now, whether Josh had those intentions, I don't know. He never said anything to me. When he got back to Australia, I met with he and his manager just around what the future might look like. And he said, I'll even train with the club. He said, I'll train with the team. He said, you've got a young squad there, and Josh Jackson had just retired, so our captain had retired. He said, if you want some leadership at training, I'll show him how to be a Bulldog. I'll get in there and train. And
he's played you beautifully,
and
Josh Reynolds.
And do the whole thing here. So he's recruited me. I haven't recruited him. So I said, oh yeah. I said, well, it's just pretty hard work.
Yeah, even if you want me to play the odd game, I'm available
he said, I'll come back and train with them and do this. And I said, all right. I said, you really want to put yourself? Yeah, no, that'll be good. And he said, no, because I want to be part of the football party. I'll do the community part and all that sort of stuff as too. But I'll train with the group. Even the young blokes. I'll go and train with the young. I said, yeah, mate, whatever you want to do. I said, yeah, right. So, and then he said, well, he said,
you need a 5'8".
His manager said, well, what about a trial? I said, what about a trial? He said, what if he trains and trials? Because they had these train and trial contracts now, I said, well, yeah. I said, well, you can trial if you likes. And they said, oh, yeah, well, we'll do a train and trial and then we'll work out what we're going to do after that. I said, good as gold. So when he's come, he's trained the house down. He's 33 going on 34. He's really had to, bust his backside to compete and get in there. But he's been very competitive and he's been very vocal and the players all love him having him around. So then we're coming into the trials and they have this session out on Belmore Oval that I'm sitting there watching, and Matt Burton had the session off. He just had a little twinge in his quadricep muscle, and so Josh Reynolds went in and played at 5'8" in the scrimmage at training. And he played really well, and like one of the issues with the Bulldogs this year is going to be experience depth and leadership, and they're the things that we've really got to work on for on field and dealing with the pressure. But Josh Reynolds has been around for such a long time, and he had no problem getting out there and telling people what to do and where to go and how to do it, and he's sort of running the show and everything like that. And the players sort of, wow. How long's this been going? Who is this bloke? It's kind of like... And so the session went so well, and then Cameron Ciraldo came over to me at the end of the session. He said, what'd you think? I said, it was good, mate. He said, yeah. He said, I think we need Josh Reynolds in the top 30. Oh, yeah, why is that? And he said, just his leadership and everything, just his leadership and his direction, he was really good, and, the players really liked being with him and all that sort of thing. And I said... And Josh Reynolds was sitting in a circle of players. I was just discussing the session about 30 metres away. So I said, Josh, come here. He said, what are you doing? I said, well, I don't want you to change your mind. I said, call him over. So I called him over. I said, Josh has come over. I said, Coach wants to talk to you. And Cameron looked at me and froze. He said, oh, you tell him. I said, head coach wants you in the top 30, mate. Get your manager to give me a call on Monday. And I shook his hand, and he just stood there and cried.
Did he really?
He just.
Oh, wow.
He gave Cameron a big hug, and I sort of left him at that. And Cameron came and saw me later. He said, we got a spot in the top 30. I said, no, I'll have to organise that. But it was sort of all done on the spur of the moment. So
yeah, that's a good yarn.
Yeah, and he thoroughly deserved it, the way he's trained. And his leadership around the boys, and even in a lot of that connectivity stuff. We talked about Anthony Seibold and Manly. All the clubs go through the same thing. And
he's a quality bloke, Josh Reynolds, isn't he?
He is, and he played in the first trial down there against Canberra, which was probably a low tier trial. Both sides played a lot of their second tier talent and backup talent, and then on the weekend he came on in the last 20 minutes and scored a try. And the Belmore people love having him around. They love having him around Belmore just during the week. He's obviously a huge personality and a favoured son of the whole club, and it's a great story for him.
So you make the 8? That's what you want to do?
Well, that'd be nice if we did.
Reid Marnie been good?
Great.
Worth his weight in gold?
Yeah. You're desperate to talk about the Bulldogs.
Well, no, it's an AskGus question. This is for the fans, not for me.
AskGus is, who do you think will improve?
Yeah, and why will the Bulldogs?
And why will well, I'd like to think we improve. I'd like to think so. Look, compared to 12 months ago when I was there, I think we're miles ahead of where we were. A lot will depend on, obviously, injuries with us. Our depth of talent in the roster is young and inexperienced, so we don't want to have to expose that too early, but we'll just see how the year plays out with that. Already Tavita Pangai's out for 5 weeks, and we won't have him to start the competition. Viliami Kikau's only had 10 minutes of football. He got a HIA on the wall. He didn't get a HIA. He got a stinger to his neck. Old mate up in the bunker ruled him out with a Category 1. He didn't have a concussion. He had a stinger.
There's a notch on the bunker count. Can we keep tally?
Yeah, but that's another story. Now they want to rub him out for 11 days. So anyway.
Chris Donovan says, do you have a bold prediction for the year? Mine is, you won't like this one. Mine is that the Storm won't make the top 8 for the first time in over 20 years. Have you seen their team, Chris? Although Pappy's, he reckons he's going to miss the first half of the year. He's had a long time out of football, that poor bloke.
Yeah, there's sort of been rumours around for a while that he was struggling with that injury, and it's a bad injury, which is not good. We need our star players playing in the game. I think that the Storm spine will always sustain them as far as scoring points, and the Bellamy influence with defence always makes them competitive. I'm trying to find 8 other teams that'll finish in front of the Storm. I can't. I think they're definitely a finals contender, and I'm just wondering about a few of the top teams, and I think this is extremely. I think the winner of this premiership might be very well hidden this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, might be very well hidden. My obvious choice is Panthers because by the end of last year they proved just how dominant they were over the rest of the field. But there's been some significant changes to their team, as you say, with Kikau and Coruscant coming out of it. I'm sure they've got the young depth to come through and replace it. They did win 4 comps last year. They've got plenty of young talent coming through. Taylor May's now missing.
Very well hidden. I'm trying to work out what you mean by that.
Well,
I
don't think it's. I think anyone who has a prediction to win the premiership is guessing. I do. Like last year, I said. Well, the last 2 years, I said Penrith will win the premiership. I had no doubts about that whatsoever. I was very, very confident in that. Last year, I said Penrith and Parramatta are playing the grand final. That's the way it turned out. That could be a fluke. It could be whatever. But that's the way I saw the teams. I just don't think it's as defined this year. I just don't. Yep. I don't know whether it's as simple as that. A lot of people saying the Roosters are a premiership contender, and they could well be, but they've got some issues to sort out as well. And sides like the Sharks, the Cowboys, the perennial finalists like South Sydney and those sort of sides, even Parramatta still, are going to have something to say about it. So I think the winner of the premiership might be well hidden. If Penrith come off a little and the others can find the necessary improvement, then it could be very tight at the back end.
Footy Head 32, do you think the Dolphins how do you think the Dolphins can fare in their first season?
Well, they've got the great coach. It's very, very difficult putting together a roster at the best of times, let alone from scratch with only 12 months notice. I've looked at a lot of the players that they've signed beyond the ones that you probably know. They've signed a lot of talented young kids.
Okay.
And both Bennett and Peter O'Sullivan have got a great eye for future talent. So I've got no doubt that Wayne Bennett there is to set this club up for the future, for Christian Wolf to take over at some other time down the track. And, his expertise and his coaching will ensure that they're competitive every time they play. But over the course of a long season, again, they might have young depth there that gets exposed a little bit too early. It mightn't be winning talent just yet, but it will be. It will in time. I think they've been very good with the talent that they've recruited outside the obvious ones that They've recruited experienced forwards and a few tradesmen and a few journeymen to sort of shore it up. But
so to a degree, he's trying to buy a little bit of time with those guys to bring the others.
Well, of course
through.
He needs time. Of course he needs time.
I mean, not that they're not disrespecting their ability as players, but he's thinking more these guys will get us going until we bring the second crop through.
You need a lot of elements to you. I can remember in my early days at Penn, I just wanted players that would play every game, train every session, would never give up, train hard, never give up, and show people what professional football was all about. It wasn't about the scoreboard. It wasn't about winning. It was about turning up every week, regardless of the result on the weekend. It was about playing the 80 minutes each week, regardless of what the scoreboard might be saying at the time or how you might be feeling, which does affect young players, and it affects young coaches, which is why they've gone for the most experienced coach in the game. He won't be intimidated by any of that. They've got the right bloke in charge there, and he's the right bloke to set them up for the future. I wouldn't be getting too excited about their credentials for this season, although early in the year they'll play with a lot of passion and a lot of pride, and he'll get them up for it. And then it'll be just how quickly the younger players, the young talent that they've got at the back end of that roster, become NRL players and start to compete at that level and then start to win at that level. That takes time. You've got to give them time. This is not just a 1 year hit and run. They're setting themselves up for a future, and they've got the right bloke in charge.
All right, so you said you're still leaning towards Penrith?
Well, they're the contenders. Look, Penrith are the contenders. I think the Cowboys, what they showed us last year, don't need to find much improvement at all to be a serious contender. South Sydney have kept their spine together. and we know what that can do for them if they keep them fit and healthy all year. They've been in the finals for the last 5 years or 6 years or whatever it is, so they're always around the money. Parramatta, they've still got Moses, they've still got Brown, they've still got Gutherson at the back there. They've got exciting outside backs.
The Moses signing yesterday was big. That could have derailed their season, but he's committed to the club now before the ball has been kicked.
Yeah. They've lost Marnie, but they've picked up an experienced hooker in the boy from Canberra, and they've always got young talent coming through. They've probably got a few injury issues in the back row at the moment for the start of the season, but they'll be bowling along there in the 8 all year, and then if they get everyone on deck for the back end of the season, they'll be hard to beat.
Sharkies look good again.
Sharks, it's time spent playing together. You get that Nico Hines and Moylan and the young boy at the back, Kennedy, and the young hooky Braille. You got that spine right. They've got a very hard-working forward pack. They've got brilliant outside backs. I mean, Mulatalo and Katoa and Talakai and Ramian. They're really experienced now, aggressive, enterprising young backs. And that's why I was really pleased with the Bulldogs' trial on the weekend. I wasn't worried too much about the scoreboard where it got to, but the first half was extremely competitive, and Sharks scored a couple of tries off fifth tackle kicks, which were nothing. So I was really happy with the way our blokes competed in that first 40 minutes. The second half became a bit of a trial, but Sharks are a serious football team. They finished second on the ladder last year. They went out in straight sets, but that often happens when you're still building your team. And a new coach in Craig Fitzgibbon, he's had another 12 months with them. They're a serious contender. The Cowboys we saw last year, they're a serious contender. They've got a great young back row. Remember, they lost one of their young back rowers towards the back end of last season as well.
Lukey?
Yeah.
He's back round 4.
Jeremiah Nanai is a sensation. He's a back row that influences the scoreboard. Valentine Holmes, they've got brilliant young outside backs. I think that they're a chance. Storm will be around. I don't see a premiership in the Storm, but I see them winning plenty of games.
They're the same contenders as last year.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what I look at. People saying, can you make the 8 this year, what have you? I'm trying to look at who drops out of the 8 from last year. On pre-season form, I think Canberra are a little vulnerable, but I know that Ricky Stewart doesn't care a bit about trials. So, I'm dismissing their form straight away.
Broncos have got Reece Walsh. I mean, they're a very formidable side.
Broncos were looking top 4 for most of last season. They fell away at the back end of the year. If Adam Reynolds can stay fit for the season, for the important game, Broncos are a team that can make a splash in this competition.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying premierships, but by the time we get to September, that's why I'm saying the premiership could be well hidden. By the time we get to September, if a couple of those top teams have fallen off and a couple of these other teams emerge and they've got momentum, they might be way better than everybody else. It would not surprise me if we get to September and Broncos are better than everyone, or Cowboys are better than everyone, I can just see a scenario like that. I don't think it's going to be as cut and dried as what we've seen it through the COVID years and what's happened there. I think that Panthers, pathway system and academy system sustained them through those COVID years and sustained them into the building of that team into the way it became. But now it's started to dilute with taking away a couple of key players. And
I can see what you're saying. You look at the comp on face value and you think, this team's going to get better. There's question marks around the top team, so there might be
the simple answer is I don't know who'll win the comp.
Yeah.
I don't know. And if I said I think this, I'll be guessing. Last year I wasn't guessing. Last year I knew Penrith would win the competition, simple as that. And that's the way it turned out. And there wasn't a lot of depth in the competition to threaten that. And I said Parramatta would be the dangers, and it turned out that they were. South fell at the final hurdles. Roosters fell away. Manly imploded. Broncos fell away at the back end of the season. South Sydney were there, had their chance, but couldn't go on with it. And that's just how the competition looked to me last year. This year, I don't know what might emerge over the next 6 months. I think we could see at the end of the season an unpredictable winner of this competition. Whether it comes from anyone outside of last year's last 8, I highly doubt. I don't think there's anyone outside of last year's top 8, other than maybe the Broncos, that might be a genuine premier. Maybe Manly, because they should have made it. Broncos and Manly should have made the 8 last year, but didn't for reasons best known to themselves.
Who's the last Bulldog to win the Dally M?
Dally M.
I'm trying to think.
Dally M.
Did Brent Sherwin win a Dally M?
Don't know.
I reckon you'll win one this year. And I am on fire with medallion predictions because I did tip Nico Hines before he'd even wore a Cronulla shirt last year.
Right.
Matt Burton win the Dally-M this year. And the trophy's going to Townsville, baby.
You think Cowboys?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can't knock that prediction. I think it's, gamble responsibly.
Now, just before we go, a couple of things I want to point out. Now, the NRLW comp, which obviously doesn't start till later in the NRL season, goes from 18 to 48 games. We've now got a 10-team competition with the Sharks, the Raiders, the Tigers and the Cowboys included. So it's 9 rounds of 5 games, then 2 semis and a grand final. The Women's State of Origin series is now a 2-game series. And the great news is you'll see more NRLW on 9 this year than you have ever seen before. We're going to be the home of the women's game. So fascinating to see how all that pans out. It's obviously come on leaps and bounds, Women's Rugby League, and it is a great product in its own right these days. And before I leave you, Queensland is uniting for Police Rugby League Memorial Day. Now, this will be something pretty close to your heart, Gus. Matches will be played at Dolphin Oval this Saturday, February 25, to honour the fallen Queensland police officers, Rachel McCrow and Matthew Arnold. And donations are being accepted for the McCrow and Arnold Remembrance Fund. Matches will be broadcast locally in Queensland from 1 p.m. on 9 and 9 now, and nationally on 9 Gem. So that is a very worthwhile cause, and everyone here at 9 and 9's Wide World of Sports are very happy to be supporting that.
Yeah, I'm the son of a policeman. My father was a policeman for 38 years, so I know what that does, or how much pressure that puts on your family, and what these people do and the dangers they face every day, and that was tragic. Every time I hear anything of a police being hurt, wounded, or unfortunately killed, it certainly hits home.
We'll be here every Wednesday. We're going to go through round 1 next week. What should we do with the cricket, by the way? You still got a bat and pads in the garage somewhere? Hello?
Well, I never give up, but gee whiz.
Well, you're in good nick.
They've tested the friendship.
Mate, 8 for 28.
Yeah, don't talk about it.
We should have batted for 2 days and been 500 ahead.
Why do we bother going? Why do we bother going? I get depressed every time we go over there.
Sorry. That's 6 Tackles with Gus, episode 1, 2023. Favourite part of the week each week. Back every Wednesday. Look forward to your company then. Ta-da!